Lebanon striking
Truth
areas
Talks.
across the country. The latest
Breaking
attacks on
news.
the capital, Beirut, have killed at least 7 people. Several others have been injured. The Israeli army says it's targeting Iran's ally Hezbollah. The Lebanese government says more than 1,200 people have been killed and more than 1.2 million displaced since fighting began a month ago. And there's also been more Israeli strikes on villages in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces are expanding their attacks in the region as they continue to occupy the area. Israel's defense minister has said all houses in the villages near the border in Lebanon will be destroyed, quote, in accordance with the model of Rafah and Beit Hanun in Gaza. Now, Asian stocks have risen after President Trump indicated the war in Iran may be over within 2 to 3 weeks. Japan's Nikkei index climbed about 5%, and South Korea's Kospi jumped 8%. The global benchmark, Brent crude oil, has fallen to around $100 per barrel after briefly hitting $119 on Tuesday. Now, the Russian government's imposing a complete ban on petrol exports. The decision's meant to prevent Russian petrol producers from selling abroad, while Moscow continues to export crude oil and other oil products, including diesel, despite international sanctions. Yulia Shapovalova reports from the Russian capital.
The increase in fuel prices due to the war in Iran has made foreign markets even more attractive for Russian petroleum producers. But to prevent a deficit on the domestic market prior to high seasonal demand and to stabilize fuel prices, the Russian government is imposing a total ban on all exports of gasoline from April the 1st. The restriction applies to all market participants, including large petroleum producers.
The ban, though, does not apply to petrol supplies under international agreements. Crude oil and diesel fuel exports are not banned either, even though these have been seriously affected by recent Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia's refineries and ports. Just last week, Ukraine struck the ports of Primorsk and Ust-Luga on the Baltic Sea, as well as the country's second largest refinery in the Leningrad region. The attacks partly limited Russia's ability to export oil and oil products. There is a fear now that the level of oil processing and exporting in Russia may decrease in the near future because of the damage caused.
This is not the first time the authorities have imposed a temporary ban on gasoline exports. The previous petrol export restrictions for small refineries were introduced in September last year against the backdrop of record growth in fuel prices and scheduled shutdowns of refineries due to continued Ukrainian drone attacks and the risk of seasonal product shortage in some regions. It was lifted at the end of January in order to avoid a surplus on the domestic market.
As petrol producers have to sell at lower prices inside the country, where prices are significantly lower than internationally, the government compensates them using its so-called fuel damper. But the measure is not helping to reduce the growing discontent among petroleum producers here, who say their expenses are growing by the day. Drivers on the streets of Moscow are also complaining.
I have been a taxi driver for a year, and in that short time, gas prices have gone up about 8% per litre.
Gasoline cannot get cheaper here, so everything else will get more expensive too.
Analysts predict that the gasoline exports ban can slow down domestic price growth, but it will not lead to a serious reduction in prices. And the external market situation will continue to have a negative impact on the Russian petrol market, even without the gasoline exports. Yulia Shapovalova, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Now, India has begun its long-delayed population count. The nationwide exercise was originally scheduled for 2021, but was delayed by COVID-19 and logistical hurdles. The last census in 2011 recorded a population of 1.21 billion. That figure is now estimated to have surged past 1.4 billion. And excitement is building along Florida's Space Coast just hours before NASA's big lunar launch. On Wednesday, four astronauts, 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, are set to make history aboard the Artemis 2 mission. It's the first journey to the moon to carry a crew in more than 50 years. Liftoff is scheduled for 22:24 GMT, and the crew will spend 10 days flying around the moon without landing, echoing the path of Apollo 8 in 1968.
It's definitely cool to know that humans are going further than ever before in history, around a couple thousand miles around the surface of the moon on the dark side.
Just because it has humans on it, and it's exciting for them to go up and go around the moon and come back. And later on, then they learn more, then they'll go up.
We'll be back in a moment, but first talk to Al Jazeera with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Always first.
Dr. Abbas Araghchi, Foreign Minister of Iran, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Your Excellency, there is a U.S. perspective stating that the negotiations are ongoing and that Iran has accepted the American conditions. What is your assessment of this Iranian position? How do you view it?
Negotiation in the literature of international relations has a specific meaning. Two countries sitting face to face, negotiating. Such a situation does not currently exist between the United States and us. However, countries sometimes exchange messages through other countries. This is not called negotiation, and this is what currently exists between Iran and the United States. We receive messages from the American side, some are direct, and others come through our friends in the region. Wherever necessary, we respond to them. Therefore, there is currently no negotiation between us. Claims made in this regard are not correct. The exchange of messages, which sometimes includes warnings from our side or points from the other side, is ongoing, but it is not a negotiation.
You mentioned now the exchange of messages directly. What do you mean by that? If there is communication with American entities or not? Or is it still the same exchange taking place through intermediaries?
The exchanges through intermediaries are ongoing. Mr. Witkoff, as before, continues to send messages, but this does not mean negotiation. Rather, it means the exchange of messages that continues in conditions of peace and war.
There is talk within the U.S. administration that discussions are taking place with a certain party in Iran. Is there indeed a party, other than the known official channels, that is negotiating with the United States? And does this imply a division or fragmentation within Iran's political system at this moment?
None of this has any accuracy. All messages are through the official channels of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is aware of them. Security services usually have contacts. Some are also conducted through those channels, but all take place within a specific framework established by the government and under the supervision of the SNSC. There is a single management in charge of all of this. There is absolutely no issue of multiple directions existing. Everything is under the management of the Supreme National Security Council.
The U.S. president has stated that you have responded to the 15 American demands. What do you say to that?
We have not yet responded to the 15-point U.S. proposal. No response has been given.
At the same time, you mentioned that you presented 5 conditions to the mediators. Has there truly been a response to these conditions? How does the United States view them?
From our side, no condition or clause has been presented to the other side. Those 5 conditions, or the 15-point framework mentioned, were based on media speculation. There are speculations, and this is the media's work. Nothing has been given to the American side from our side.
Where do the negotiations currently stand? Can we genuinely speak of progress? or does the situation remain complex on both sides?
هنوز هیچ تصمیمی از طرف ما گرفته نشده.
We have yet to make a decision. We have many considerations regarding this matter. Our conditions for ending the war are clear. We do not accept a ceasefire. We are seeking an end to the war, not only in Iran but across the entire region. We seek guarantees that such aggressions will not be repeated, as well as the payment of compensation for the extent of the damages inflicted on us and on the people of Iran. At present, there is no ground for negotiation, and at present, there is no negotiation. Our position is clear, and at present, there is no ground for negotiation.
How can we talk about progress in negotiations? You have indicated that there is currently no common ground for negotiations. What is the basis or foundation you seek to enter negotiations with the United States?
Naturally, when the highest leadership of the Islamic Republic concludes that the interests of the Iranian nation will be preserved, the necessary instructions will be issued to institutions including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our goal is to secure the interests of the Iranian people and to preserve their rights. This is the goal of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and at present, this goal is being pursued through defense against a foreign enemy, specifically the United States and the Zionist regime. Whenever it becomes necessary for this defense to be carried out through another means, the necessary instructions will naturally be issued.
There are suggestions of concern or caution that another attack on Iran could occur during negotiations. Is this fear of a potential U.S. attack? What is currently preventing you from engaging in negotiations?
Of course, the assault is currently ongoing, but your point is correct. We have no good experience of negotiating with the United States. In the past, we negotiated and reached an agreement, only for the United States to withdraw from it for no reason. Twice more, this year and last year, we negotiated, and the result was their assault and attack. There is no trust that negotiation with the United States can lead to results. Trust is at zero. Every time they present a proposal for negotiation, the first issue we must examine is how honest they are, and we see none. There is no trust, and to build trust, major steps must be taken. Whether the Islamic Republic decides to do so or not is another matter. But in response to any proposal, the issue is how much trust exists. At present, no trust exists.
You spoke about guarantees, specifically that you seek assurances that a war against Iran will not be repeated. Can mediating countries such as Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey serve as guarantors in these negotiations? Are there serious efforts underway to bring Iranians and Americans together for negotiations to resolve this conflict and the war?
Another serious issue is what guarantees can be provided. Naturally, the guarantee of one or two countries cannot be sufficient. Even experience has shown us that a guarantee by the Security Council cannot be sufficient either. Ideas and proposals have been put forward by our friends regarding how guarantees can be secured for a complete and lasting end to the war. These ideas have been conveyed to us, and we are examining what could serve as a guarantee if one day the war were to end on Iran's terms.
What guarantees are you requesting independently of what intermediaries convey? What are the specific guarantees Iran seeks to end the war and prevent its recurrence?
There are various ideas. I do not want to go into these ideas because there is still no basis for negotiation for us to put forward a proposal on this matter. But if we ever become confident that there is intent and will to end the war, we will discuss these proposals as well.
The U.S. president has reportedly given a deadline until April 6, stating that if Tehran does not respond in negotiations, a comprehensive attack will be launched targeting energy, oil, and vital infrastructure across Iran.
النقاط الحيوية في إيران. أولا
What do you say to that?
بارها ما رو امتحان کردن، ما ضرب العجل نمیپذیریم.
They have tested us many times. We do not accept deadlines. For us, securing the interests and rights of the Iranian people is what matters. No one can set deadlines for us. Artificial deadlines do nothing but make matters more difficult. And you have seen that these deadlines have been extended twice so far. The President of the United States must change his approach. You cannot speak to the people of Iran with the language of threats and deadlines. Our people are a great people with a very rich culture. One must speak to the people of Iran with respect. Otherwise, they will receive exactly the response they are receiving now.
One of the key points of disagreement between the United States and Iran currently is the Strait of Hormuz. How is Iran currently thinking about the strait? Is Iran considering actual control over it and prevented all countries from passing through? Or is there a different vision for dealing with it?
ببینید تنگه هرمز
Regarding the Strait of Hormuz, the reality is that it lies within the internal waters of Iran and Oman. It is not in international waters. It is the internal waters of Iran and Oman. Naturally, the interests of Iran and Oman regarding transit through this strait must be preserved. From our point of view, the strait is currently open and is closed only to those who are at war with Iran. Naturally, during wartime, we cannot allow those who are at war with us to pass through our internal waters. Ships from other countries do not pass through the strait due to regional insecurity and high insurance costs. Some of them have entered into negotiations with us. And for many of them, especially those from friendly countries, we have put arrangements in place so they can pass through the strait safely. You have seen the news. Some countries have passed through the strait after reaching an agreement with Iran, and Iran has provided the arrangements for their safe passage. What arrangements will be considered after the war is a matter related to Iran and Oman. Of course, in this regard, we will certainly consider the interests of our other friends, both in and outside the region. From our perspective, the Strait of Hormuz can be a waterway of peace, enabling the calm passage of ships from all countries. But naturally, ensuring the security of this region, ensuring the safety of ship passage, addressing environmental issues, navigation, traffic, and regulations all require order and arrangements that pertain to the coastal states of this strait, Iran and Oman.
There are serious American threats about taking control of certain islands and even conducting a ground landing operation, as reported in some U.S. media outlets, to control the area. How does Iran view these threats? And is Iran prepared to respond militarily to such actions?
من یه بار قبلا به این سوال جواب دادم.
I have previously answered this question once and said that we are waiting. I do not think they would dare to do such a thing. Very heavy casualties would await them. Of course, we do not seek this. We did not start this war, but we defended ourselves forcefully. You have seen the damage inflicted on them, to their facilities, equipment, radars, aircraft and strategic aircraft, and what happened to their AWACS. In ground warfare, we are even better than this. We are fully prepared to confront any ground threat to our country, and we hope they do not make this mistake.
Many say Iran may expand the scope of its confrontation to include Bab el-Mandab and the Red Sea. Is there any movement, at least diplomatically or within military circles in Iran, regarding this possibility?
ما قبلا هم گفتیم بحث باب المندب
We have said before that the issue of Bab al-Mandeb concerns the countries of the region, and Yemen has its own policies in this regard. Just as they previously took actions in support of the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people, if they now decide to take any action, that is up to them. We are not asking anyone for anything. We know very well how to defend ourselves, and we do not need anyone in this regard. But if groups in Lebanon, Iraq, or Yemen decide on their own to take actions in support of the people of Iran, that is up to them.
خودشون تشخیص بدن که اقداماتی رو در حمایت از مردم ایران بکنن به خود اونها مربوط.
There are reports that Iran is demanding that any negotiation table with the United States to end the war should include all members of the axis of resistance. What do you mean by that?
نه از نظر ما هر گونه
From our perspective, any end to the war in Iran must be comprehensive and complete across the entire region. When we speak about ending the war, we mean ending the war in Iran, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, across the whole region. We want peace and the absence of war throughout the region, and I think the region agrees. I hope the United States and the Zionist regime understand this as well. The war must end under conditions in which the entire region is at peace, and there is a guarantee that it will not be repeated.
Would these groups from Lebanon to Iraq to Yemen be present at the negotiation table alongside Iran in talks with the United States?
For now, there will be no negotiations. No decision has been made yet. Whenever a decision is made, we will consider it then.
There is discussion that the United States estimate a war time frame of 4 to 6 weeks. What is Iran's own estimate or preparedness timeline for war?
We do not set any deadline for defending ourselves. Wherever necessary, we will defend ourselves in whatever way is necessary. We will defend ourselves, our people, and our country in whatever way is required. It does not matter to us what policy our enemies adopt or what deadlines they set. Of course, we recommend that before they suffer further damage, they should end this war and end it completely and permanently.
Meanwhile, statements from Iran suggest readiness for up to 6 months of war. Is Iran truly prepared for such a duration, specifically given that the United States and Israel are talking about targeting Iran's missile and air defense systems?
For at least 6 months, wherever necessary, we will defend our country.
There are also American claims that Iranian missile and drone systems are currently being targeted, with accusations that Iran is using them against countries in the region. What is your response? Is Iran indeed targeting regional countries?
So, where do these missiles that are being fired come from? Where do these drones heading towards them come from? Just 2 days ago, we destroyed this American AWACS aircraft worth about $600 million with a low-cost Iranian drone. So where do these come from? I think we should not pay much attention to the American propaganda campaign. The world is aware. It sees that our strikes are continuing consistently and that they have not been able to stop them. They have also not been able to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. They even sought help from other countries, but still couldn't do it. Now they are even pleading for negotiations. Therefore, I think we should not pay too much attention to our enemy's propaganda. The reality on the ground is that we have maintained our defensive capabilities. Our strikes against the enemy continue, and they continue strongly.
If negotiations between Iran and the United States were to take place, what issues would Iran prioritize at the negotiation table? The American side speaks about the nuclear program, the missile program, and Iran's regional policies. What are Iran's priorities in these negotiations?
There is still no plan for negotiations. If one day we reach that point, we will determine the priorities.
There is concern among countries in the region. They ask, if Iran is confronting the United States, why are these countries being targeted? This includes Gulf states such as Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. There's a sense of grievance, as described in Arabic.
We have explained this many times. We truly do not attack our friends in the Persian Gulf region. We attack American facilities, American forces, and American targets that unfortunately are located in these countries. There may be collateral damage, but our targets are only American objectives in these countries. There is a reality that no one can deny. The United States is using the territory, airspace, and waters of these countries to attack Iran. There is substantial evidence and documentation for this. Even the Americans themselves have said it. They have admitted where the guided missiles fired at Iran were launched from. Are they fired from 2,000 kilometers away? No, they are launched from within the region. When their aircraft take off from their ships, where do they refuel? They have no other way. They refuel in the region through American aerial tankers stationed at their bases there. 3 American F-15s were in Kuwait, and according to them, they were mistakenly shot down. Well, anyone can ask, what were they doing in Kuwait? It was clear that they were using Kuwait's airspace to attack Iran. The fact that the United States is using the airspace, territory, and waters of these countries against Iran is a reality. We only target American objectives located in these countries, places that provide services to these forces and where they gather. American newspapers themselves have admitted that American soldiers hide in hotels and office buildings in Persian Gulf countries. In reality, they are using the people of the Persian Gulf as human shields. Why do they not see this reality? We did not start this war. The United States started this war, and the Zionist regime started it, using their bases in these areas. Our friends in the Persian Gulf region should complain about the United States and the Zionist regime and condemn them instead of complaining about us. Why have they never condemned the aggression against Iran? Instead, they condemn us for defending ourselves. That is really not fair. We want our friends in the region to live with dignity and pride. We respect Arab sovereignty. We do not insult them the way their American friends sometimes do. The United States has made very insulting remarks about the leaders of the Persian Gulf countries, but we speak to them with respect.
Finally, how do you envision the future nature of Iran's relationship with the countries of the region?
We want respectful and friendly relations. I accept that in the future we will have difficult work ahead to rebuild trust. Still, I am confident that with the goodwill on our side, the Islamic values prevalent in Arab countries, and the common goals we share for the security of the Persian Gulf region, we can rebuild that trust. We live together in this region. The security of this region must be ensured by ourselves. The presence of American bases in this region has shown that they not only do not provide security, but are actually against the security of the region. Our friends in the Persian Gulf region should ask why American bases could not protect their security and instead became a source of insecurity for them. If there were no American bases in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and the other countries of the region, no one would attack them. The presence of American bases in the region disrupts the security of the countries of the region. In the future, we must reach a joint decision to live together in security. Security requires a collective regional structure. It cannot exist for one side and not for the other. The same is true for prosperity, progress, and development. It cannot exist for one side and not for the other. If we want lasting peace in this region, we must move away from foreign forces and rely on ourselves. We must establish security through security agreements and economic agreements amongst ourselves. I hope and I am confident that in this way, the region's security will be more sustainable.
Dr. Abbas Araghchi, Foreign Minister of Iran, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
It's the top of the hour, and we welcome you to... It's the top of the hour, and we welcome you to Morning Mic Drop at Truth Talks Live, where your voice matters. Stay tuned for our breaking world news coverage this hour. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for when we go live. And now, breaking news.
Are y'all ready to roll? Let's go. It's the top of the hour, and you are watching Morning Mic Drop on Truth Talks Alive, where FACT matters. And now, breaking news.
It is 10 GMT, 1 p.m. in Doha. You're watching Al Jazeera's extensive coverage of the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. I'm Fully Batibo, coming up in the next 60 minutes.
But we're finishing the job, and I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer.
President Donald Trump says the U.S. could end the war in Iran in 2 to 3 weeks, even if there is no deal. Iran's foreign minister tells Al Jazeera he's had messages from the U.S., but there are no negotiations.
We do not have any faith that negotiations with the U.S. will yield any results. The trust level is at zero.
Also this hour, no let-up in U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, with reports of attacks on Tehran and south of the country. Iran keeps up its attacks on Israel and the Gulf states. A drone has hit a fuel tank at Kuwait International Airport, sparking a massive fire.
This is not our war. We will not be drawn into the conflict.
And Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer pushes back on U.S. pressure and announces the UK will host an international summit on the Strait of Hormuz. President Donald Trump says U.S. forces could end their war on Iran within weeks, setting out the clearest timeline yet for a possible withdrawal. Speaking at the White House, Trump said Tehran does not need to make a deal for the U.S. to end its war.
The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in 2
I think
3
with
weeks?
2 or 3 weeks.
Not 3 weeks. If it is
we'll
3
leave.
weeks.
No, they don't have to make a deal with me. When we feel that they are, for a long period of time, put into the Stone Ages, and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon, then we'll leave. Whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant.
The White House has also announced that Trump will address the nation later on Wednesday to give an important update on Iran. Meanwhile, in an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran has zero trust in Washington and that no negotiations are taking place.
Nothing like this exists right now. Countries usually send messages to one another either directly or indirectly. This is not called negotiation, but this does exist right now. We have received messages from the US. Some are direct, some are through some of our regional friends. And wherever it is necessary, we reply to these messages. However, no negotiation has taken place, and the reports about that are not accurate.
We have a team of correspondents covering the latest developments this hour in Kuwait City, Sana'a, Dubai, London, and Tehran. And Tehran is where we begin with Al Jazeera's Tawhid Asadi in the Iranian capital. How are Iranian leaders, Tawhid, responding to these latest comments from President Trump about ending the war in 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, actually, when it comes to military aspects, Iranians are saying that they will determine how long the war is going to take and when it's going to be finished, A. And also, B, they're saying that there is a preparedness for a war of attrition, for a prolonged confrontation, seeing the very fact that now there are new battlefields, new fronts opening up in this already intricate battlefield, and they're trying to also use the geostrategic assets such as Strait of Hormuz as a leverage in this complicated situation. And of course, from the diplomatic perspective, Iranians are saying that right now negotiation with the United States in a direct way is not on the table, let alone any deal that could be reached following these talks if happens. And of course, Iranians are talking about mediated communication. Again, when it comes to that, we don't see that much of hope. Previously, we know that the American side has sent actually a 15-plan proposal to Iranians, but the Iranian response was that it was not welcomed, it was called unreasonable, it was called maximalist. All in all, from two perspectives and from the reality on the ground, the most important aspect of which is the continuation of the airstrikes, we don't see that much that could be called a sign of de-escalation from the Iranian perspective.
As you say, the reality on the ground is that U.S. and Israeli air attacks are continuing. There have been strikes, I understand, on Iran's industrial base. What's been the damage, Tawhid?
Yes, fully. Over the past 20 hours, we have been witnessing the continuation of the airstrikes. Red Crescent says more than 92,000 civilian units have been targeted, including the schools and hospitals. But right now, it seems that we are entering actually over the past 1 week or two a new phase in which, infrastructurally speaking, the country is facing damages as a result of these airstrikes. In the capital, we know that over the past one day, a pharmaceutical company was targeted. But more importantly, we have to refer to the attacks on the steel infrastructure, steel companies, most important of which I can refer to Fulad Mobarakeh or Mobarakeh Steel Company, which was targeted twice over the past few weeks. And the latest resulted, according to what they say from the company, a huge damage to the production unit of this company. And speaking of the context, this is very important because both when it comes to exports and when it comes to the dependency dependency of other industrial sectors to steel industry, we know that it is going to put a severe impact on the industrial sectors across the country. But still, this is not limited to that. We know that other steel companies across the country have been targeted. We know that other infrastructures in different cities, including power plants and infrastructures related to power, have been targeted. We know that oil depot from the very first weeks of the war inside the country, specifically inside the capital, were targeted. And this is all in all creating a huge amount of infrastructural damage for a country that has already faced a deteriorated economic situation.
Tawhid, thank you very much for the update there from Tehran, Tawhid Asadi. Meanwhile, Iran has fired missiles towards Israel, injuring at least 25 people. The Israeli ambulance service says a cluster munition missile hit multiple sites in and around Tel Aviv. Health officials say children are among the injured, including a young girl in a serious condition with shrapnel injuries. Nida Ibrahim has more from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank.
Another attack was detected by the Israeli home front, and sirens blasted across of Tel Aviv. Now we are getting reports of major damage to an area called Petah Tikva that's in the greater Tel Aviv area, as well as more injuries as a result of two ballistic missiles this time attacking these areas, in addition to one of them being a cluster munition, a fragmenting warhead. Now, to talk about Bnei Brak, according to the Israeli ambulance service, one girl, a 10-year-old, has been severely injured as a result of these fragmenting warheads that have splintered across and caused major damage in the area. According to the Israeli newspaper of Ma'arif, 100 people will have to leave their homes now and be evacuated in other areas, into other areas, because of the massive damage that has incurred to their houses, their homes, and their establishments as a result of that. We were talking about a relative calm, some 19 hours of mostly rockets being fired from Hezbollah, but not really much being fired from Iran. And since the morning, we've been seeing this intensification of rockets being fired and missiles being fired from Iran. 4 times sirens blasted, and at some point all across Israel was under attack with sirens coming in from Hezbollah, from Iran, and the Israelis say that these cluster munitions continue to cause damage even after they are intercepted, and they expect that these missiles will continue to be fired because the Israelis tonight will be marking the eve of Passover, a very important Jewish holiday.
Elsewhere in the region, Kuwait says a drone attack on its international airport has targeted fuel tanks. Officials say the strike caused a large fire and damaged fuel storage facilities at the airport. No injuries have been reported. Let's bring in Malik Trainer in Kuwait City for us. Malik, the fire at the airport, not the first time that airport has been targeted. What's the latest? Has it been contained?
Well, according to authorities here in Kuwait, teams are still trying to put that fire out. Folly, as you mentioned, this isn't the first time. It's actually the 7th time that the international airport has been hit since the beginning of this war. The last time it was hit, which was last week, a fuel tank that is, it took 58 hours for civil defense teams to put that fire out. I think, we're seeing an alarming number of civil infrastructure being hit here in Kuwait in the last 2 weeks. The Al Ahmadi refinery port has been hit. The Mbarak Al Kabir commercial port, as well as the Shwayah commercial port. Also, the airport, as I mentioned, and a desalination and power plant service building was damaged in the last couple of days. So since the beginning of this war, Kuwait has detected more than 900 ballistic missiles and drones targeting the area. In the last couple of hours, the Kuwaiti National Bank said that it was closing for today and tomorrow, given the recent developments, and as a safety measure for its customers and employees. Just goes to show you the raising concerns that authorities here and the escalating nature that this war is taking on.
Thank you very much for that, Malik Trainer, with the latest there from Kuwait. A tanker leased by Qatar Energy has been damaged off the coast of Qatar after it was hit by a projectile. The British Maritime Monitoring Agency said the incident happened about 30 kilometers north of the industrial city of Ras Laffan. Zain Basravi is joining us now from Dubai for more on what's happening across the region. I know there have been attacks in the UAE, Zain, as well. Let's start off with what's happened off the coast of Qatar. What is the extent of the damage on the tanker there?
Absolutely, has to be said. Qatar has so far, as many GCC countries have, intercepted most of what's been fired at them by Iran as part of its retaliation for coming under attack. Numbers thrown around go from 90 to 95% of whatever is fired does get taken down. But Iran is really playing the numbers here. They're playing the averages. You fire enough stuff, something is bound to get through, and that's what seems to have happened here. Qatar's defense ministry is saying 3 missiles were launched from Iran earlier today. 2 of them were intercepted off the coast, but 1 did manage to make it through and hit this tanker. It hit the Aqua 1 oil tanker leased to the state-owned Qatar Energy in Qatar's territorial waters. This happened about 31 kilometers north of the Ras Laffan industrial hub. Of course, we know Ras Laffan's liquid natural gas facilities have been hit and decommissioned in previous weeks. Now, the vessel that was hit, it was hit on the port side. There was damage caused to it above the waterline. We know that everyone was evacuated. It was a 21-person crew. They are set to be safe. There was no impact on no environmental impact as a result of this hit, according to Qatar Energy. But the UK MTO, the monitoring group that monitors traffic in those waters, said that there was a projectile that remained unexploded in the engine room, and that was being investigated earlier. But so far, nothing else has come from that, and seems to have been a situation that was handled. I'll get to a couple of other things that have been happening elsewhere in the GCC. An Iranian attack also caused a fire at a company facility in Bahrain, a commercial company there. Shrapnel falling from an intercepted drone in UAE's Emirate of Fujairah killed a Bangladeshi national on a farm in the Al Rifa area. And we have to say that so many of the incidents of casualties and injuries have happened to Asian expatriate workers here living in the UAE. And this is another example of how falling debris is still such a danger, even somewhere as remote as a farm in Fujairah. Saudi defenses say they intercepted multiple drones, and just in the last hour, we're getting reports of a person has been injured in the Emirate of Al Quwain, again from debris fall from an intercepted drone here in the UAE.
And the UAE, Zain, imposing now flight restrictions on Iranian nationals. What kind of restrictions?
That is correct. Really, Emirates Airlines, other Dubai Airlines, confirming murmurs we've been hearing for some days about specific policy targeting, looking at specifically Iranian travelers. And what we know now is that more than 1,200 Iranians have returned home from the UAE. The Iranian government saying they've made preparations to support them during this transition. But what Dubai Airlines are saying is that Emirates Airlines will not allow Iranian nationals to enter or transit through the UAE unless they have a golden visa or a long-term residency of some kind. But what we are seeing here is it's also on the Emirates Airlines website, specific guidance for Iranian visa holders, but also Iranian citizens that are transiting or traveling through. We've heard reports that they weren't being allowed to board planes that were coming through the UAE. And what the website is saying is that golden visa holders, senior professionals, athletes, and family members of UAE citizens are allowed to enter, but other Iranian nationals are being barred from boarding flights or transiting or entering the UAE. And really what we're seeing here is that it's an extension of the fallout of this war. Across the GCC, internal security apparatus, the internal security of these countries have all heightened their security level. And we've seen operations that have been targeting what have been described as cells. And really what this is that more fallout of the war. Yeah. Regular people, civilians, in this case, Iranian civilians caught up in events that continue to be ongoing. And likely this kind of security measure is going to get worse the longer this conflict goes on.
Zain, thank you very much for your reporting. Zain Basravi, live for us there in Dubai. Yemen's Ansarullah group, also known as the Houthis, says it's carried out a missile attack targeting Israel. Earlier, Israel said it had intercepted a missile launched from Yemen. The Yemeni group joined the war 3 days ago, opening a new front in the Iran conflict. Let's bring in Yusuf Mauri in Sana'a for us. What more are the Ansarullah Houthis saying about this latest missile launch towards Israel?
Well, they're saying that these attacks are going to continue and they will launch more advanced missiles, including the fragmented warhead hypersonic missile, which they've launched previously in these rounds of sporadic attacks against Israel. Of course, this has been a back and forth. The last attack that the Ansarullah Houthis carried out was just a couple of days ago, which consisted of a series of drone strikes. And before that, on March 28th, was the first attack and the first announcement made by the Ansarullah Houthis military spokesperson, where he mentioned that we've entered the war, they've joined this war with Iran, and they have red lines, 3 red lines that cannot be crossed. And if they are crossed, they will continue these attacks and continue to advance them on a weekly basis. Their first condition is that Israel and the U.S. stop their attacks against Iran. Their second demand is that the Israeli government abides by the Gaza ceasefire agreement and ends its military attacks against the Gaza Strip and ends its military attacks against Lebanon and other various axis of resistance factions in Iraq. The statements previously, before the attacks, the Houthis have always said that our fingers are on the trigger. Well, now it seems that they have pulled that trigger and they have seemed to pull Israel into a conflict and a war with Yemen. Israel has not yet responded to these attacks by the Ansarullah movement. Yemenis are anticipating that eventually Israel or the U.S. are going to attack Yemen and will most likely attack the heart of Yemen's economy, the port of Hodeidah, which is responsible for 80% of goods and basic necessities, medical supplies that enter into the country. They all come through the port of Hodeidah. And the port of Hodeidah has been the main target of U.S. or Israeli attacks. That's the fear amongst the Yemeni people. But until then, I think we can expect to see more of these Ansarullah Houthi attacks. I've spoken with an Ansarullah Houthi official who tells me that their plan is to get Israel to overreach its air defense system, to overstretch its air defense system to not only sustain attacks from Iran, from Hezbollah, and from the factions in Iraq, but also to be on the lookout for attacks from Yemen. So it is coming in coordination. These attacks from Yemen are coming in with coordination from Iran and with coordination with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, letting the world know that the Houthis are letting the world know that they have fully joined this war, and they will continue to launch these attacks until a ceasefire can be reached between the U.S. and Iran.
Yusuf Mauri in Sana'a, thank you very much for the update. In other developments, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the UK will not take part in the war on Iran. It comes as the Daily Telegraph newspaper reports that Donald Trump told it he's considering pulling the US out of NATO. In an address to the nation, Starmer said the UK is pushing for diplomacy to end the conflict in the Middle East.
This is not our war. We will not be drawn into the conflict. That is not in our national interest. And the most effective way we can support the cost of living in Britain is to push for de-escalation in the Middle East and a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is such a vital route for energy. To that end, we're exploring each and every diplomatic avenue that is available to us.
Let's bring in Rory Challens in London for us. Rory, so the Prime Minister talking about the impact of the war on with Iran there. Any change at all in the messaging?
Not really. This was a message from Keir Starmer that mixed both the international and the domestic. He reiterated, as we just heard him there in that clip that you played, a message that we have heard several times from Keir Starmer, and I counted at least 3 times in his press conference earlier. This is not the UK's war, and the UK will not be drawn into it. Having said that, he did say that this was a conflict that was escalating through the UK system and was having an effect on this country. And he was outlining measures that the government was going to take to try and mitigate those effects on UK people, Britons. Internationally, he said that the diplomatic efforts that the UK would undertake would be with a view to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That was the best way of restoring normality. He said that his foreign minister, his foreign secretary, Yvette Cooper, was going to be hosting an international summit to try and make that happen. And also that the UK was talking to its military planners to try and work out how militarily the straits could be reopened after, crucially, he stressed this, after the fighting has stopped. And then he pivoted onto domestic measures, talking about how fuel prices were going to be coming down in the short term, and that wages were going to be going up, and that there would be a fund made available for the most vulnerable people in the country to cope with the effects of this conflict.
Right. And his address there coming, Rory, amid these reports that President Donald Trump has said he's seriously considering pulling the U.S. out of NATO. What did the Prime Minister have to say about that?
Well, he started by saying that the UK is and always has been fully committed to NATO, that NATO is the most successful military alliance in history, and that the UK absolutely would not be walking away from it. He went on to say that there has been huge amounts of pressure on himself, of course, referring to the barbs that Donald Trump has been throwing his way, saying that he's no Winston Churchill. Recently, he said that despite the pressure, despite the noise, as he put it, that he would always be working in the national interests. And thirdly, he talked about Europe, because he has stressed in this conference, and it's an emerging strain of an emerging part of his premiership this time, that he is looking towards Europe. And perhaps away from the United States. UK foreign policy for generations has been about balancing the UK's position towards America and its position towards Europe. Since Brexit, the emphasis has been looking towards the United States, but no longer. With Donald Trump and this war, things are tilting back towards Europe for the United Kingdom.
Rory, thank you very much for that. That's Rory Challens live for us in London. Well, let's discuss this and all the latest developments in the conflict now with Hamid Reza Azizi, who's a visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, and Samir Puri, visiting lecturer in war studies at King's College London. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us. Hamid Reza Azizi in Berlin, let me start with you and pick up where we left off with Rory and the European position, which is still a very cautious one from what we heard there from Keir Starmer. But if these reports of Donald Trump considering pulling out of NATO are confirmed, and if they materialize, do you expect a change in the US and the European stance?
I don't expect any considerable change in the European position because Donald Trump's threats of pulling out of NATO is nothing new, as we know. He made the same statements even in his first term in office, and then since returning to office in the past 2 years, he's been pushing for kind of more involvement, more investment in military affairs by the NATO allies. So on that level, this is nothing new. On another level, we should see this war, the European reactions to it, and Trump's reaction to Europe as an inflection point in the kind of already strained relationship between Europe and the United States, or this transatlantic relation, because we know that there was the issue of Canada.
Right.
I mean, speaking of NATO, then there was the issue of Greenland. So all these now have manifested in this war, and the European positions that apparently, I mean, obviously differs from that of the United States, and they don't want to get involved in this.
Right. Samir Puri, your thoughts. There's a lot to talk about with regards to the Iran war first, but on Trump's threat to pull out of NATO, should they be taken more seriously this time around?
Yes, actually. It is not the first time he said it, but the point is that these things can accumulate a momentum in Trump's mind within the MAGA community. And the level of kind of visceral anger voiced by Trump towards the UK and other European allies, but also by Pete Hegseth, and also the fact the US is actually in a bit of a bind of its own making by the way in which it's approached its joint attack on Iran with Israel, means I think that even if for no other reason that the sort of the psychological and the moral kind of underpinnings of the bond of NATO weakens further. I mean, Trump was the one to mention in his sort of latest comments on NATO that Putin knows it's weak as well. Well, Vladimir Putin in Russia will be delighted that the bonds that bind NATO as a transatlantic alliance are fraying even more, even if they never snap entirely.
Right. Now, Samir, on Iran, the US president has said the war could end in 2 to 3 weeks without, whether or not there is a deal. What do you think we can expect from his much anticipated address later today? What will be the core message there? Do you think it's going to clarify or further muddle these mixed messages on diplomacy versus decisive military action that we've been getting from Washington?
Yeah, if I was to hazard a guess, my guess would be that his speechwriters are either rewriting it as they go along or will only write it almost shortly before he goes on stage, because I can't imagine that he has a very fixed view as to what he wants to do from now on. There's still a number of hours to go till that press conference happens. And sadly, with the way this White House has vacillated in its decision-making, it could vacillate in all sorts of different directions. But I think probably the key thing for this press conference is whether Trump talks about how those US Marines and air assault troops that have now been positioned in and around the Gulf will be used, what sort of comment he makes on the Pakistan-hosted negotiations that have taken place, and whether he sets a firm deadline around the end of US military action. So those are maybe 3 key points from the press conference to come.
Hamid Reza, your thoughts about what we can expect from Donald Trump, and also how will Iranian leaders be viewing this? The fact that he's now talking about ending the war, regardless of whether or not there is a deal. What signal does that send to Iranian leaders?
Well, I think the one predictable feature of President Trump is unpredictability, as we all know. So it can go towards either direction. He may further, raise this argument of the war goals achieved and kind of preparing the public opinion and also the world for some sort of withdrawal, or he can, of course, discuss the options for ground troops entering into the country. But what I can tell is, of course, how it is perceived in Iran. So as far as I can follow the narrative coming from Tehran, in their view, the chances of a ground operation at this moment, kind of the escalation, is more than de-escalation. And none of Trump's words are taken at face value, because what they see and what they discuss is these troop deployments and redeployments in the region. Most recently, also, there were reports of A-10 fighter jets, which are used in as close support, aircraft in ground operations. Those have been also deployed to the region. So all these indicate that it might be soon. And I saw actually yesterday a kind of argument and analysis that given that the Easter holidays are coming and the global financial markets will be closed, that might be the window that actually Trump wants to use in order to initiate an attack.
Interesting. So how are the Iranians, Hamid Reza, then preparing for a possible ground operation, and under what conditions would they agree to end the war?
They have, on the one hand, increased recruitment of volunteers, the IRGC especially, and on the other hand, they have been strengthening their positions around the key islands in the Persian Gulf. Also, we've seen increased targeting of the positions of Kurdish insurgent groups in Iraqi Kurdistan, because they think it may actually come as a multi-front operation, not just one front, not just, for example, an attack on one of the islands. So these are the things that they are doing. And some actually are arguing that in a ground operation scenario, Iran may have the advantage because it doesn't have the air power to confront the US airstrikes. But that way, if they are indeed prepared, they can get enough casualties to make Trump end this war on Iran's terms. So this is the idea that is raised.
Samir Puri, your thoughts. How do you see a possible ground operation unfolding if it happens?
We don't know, of course, but I would imagine that limited options in which US troops are used to seize some Iranian islands or to provide some sort of overwatch or targeting ability for air power to strike parts of the coastline, I would imagine it would be more limited. But there's no possibility of using a ground invasion to try to enact a regime change. They don't have enough troops, and Iran is so many times bigger than Iraq is compared to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So I think whatever role the US ground troops will be used for is relatively minor. But this is to the other guest's point. The risks to the US of ground troops are huge, because I think there's a qualitative difference in the sort of American psyche of seeing American soldiers potentially being killed in infantry roles than there is sort of their air crew and their base personnel who've been killed by sort of precision by munitions at distance. So I think there's a huge risk there, and I think the MAGA base, already frayed by Trump's sort of reversal on not getting involved in wars in the Middle East, it will become even more delicate if there is this body count issue phenomenon coming out of the Iranian war, with US ground troops potentially being killed by Iran.
Gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us. Very interesting to hear your analysis about this. Hamid Reza Azizi in Berlin and Samir Puri in Singapore. Thank you for your time. You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of the latest developments.
It's the top of the hour, and you are watching Morning Mic Drop on Truth Talks Alive. We're FACT. And now, breaking news.
Speaking at the White House, Trump said Tehran does not need to make a deal for Washington to end its war. The White House also announced that President Trump will address the nation on Wednesday to give an important update on Iran. Meanwhile, Iran has fired missiles towards central and northern Israel, injuring at least 25 people. The Israeli ambulance service says a cluster munition missile hit multiple sites in and around Tel Aviv. And a tanker has been damaged off the coast of Qatar after being hit by a projectile. The British Maritime Monitoring Agency said the incident happened about 30 kilometers north of the industrial city of Ras Laffan. And Kuwait says its international airport was hit by a drone attack targeting fuel tanks. Now, Israel has been bombing Lebanon, striking areas across the country. The latest attacks on the capital, Beirut, have killed at least 7 people. Several others have been injured. The Israeli army says it's targeting Iran's ally, Hezbollah. The Lebanese government says more than 1,200 people have been killed and more than 1.2 million displaced since the fighting began a month ago. There have been more Israeli strikes also on villages in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces are expanding their attacks in the region as they continue to occupy the area. Israel's defense minister has said all houses in the villages near the border with Lebanon will be destroyed, quote, in accordance with the model of Rafah and Beit Hanun in Gaza. The Israeli army has issued forced displacement orders for people in southern Lebanon to head north of the Zahrani River. This is about 40 kilometers from the Israeli border. It means that the evacuation zone now extends beyond the Litani to the Zahrani River. That's about 14% of Lebanon's territory, affecting more than 100 towns and villages. Al Jazeera's Zina Khada reports from the scene of the latest Israeli attack in Beirut.
Yet more attacks in the Lebanese capital. Overnight, there were 2 Israeli strikes. We are at the site of one of those attacks in Shner. This is on the edge of Beirut's southern suburbs. A car or cars were targeted. The Lebanese army is still investigating what exactly happened. But unlike previous targeted assassinations, this one did not hit an apartment in a residential building, but a car or cars. Now, this is a residential area. Damage has been widespread. There's a school nearby where the displaced people live. According to Lebanon's health ministry, 5 people were killed. They do not identify the victims. The Israeli military says it killed, the targets were senior commanders of Hezbollah. Hezbollah does not confirm or deny Israeli military reports. There is no front line in this conflict, even though most of the strikes and military activity has been in southern Lebanon, as the Israeli military continues with its ground invasion. The defense minister warning and threatening that the Israeli army will maintain security control of the entire area up to the Litani River, even after this war ends. And this is causing a lot of concern in Lebanon because there's a feeling that this is not just about defensive measures, but the Israeli military wants to set up an occupation zone in the south of the country. It once occupied South Lebanon from 1978 till the year 2000. And it's not just the words of Israeli officials, but their actions, emptying that whole area from residents, targeting Lebanese army positions, telling UNIFIL that it would be better to avoid being in a combat zone because as of late, 3 UN peacekeepers have been killed. So there's growing concern about Israel's intentions in southern Lebanon. The United Nations saying that there's a dangerous deterioration in the security situation across the country. And as you can see, we are in the Lebanese capital and these strikes keep happening. Zena Khadr, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
For more on the situation in Lebanon, let's now speak to Rania Khalek, who's a political analyst and journalist with Breakthrough News, an independent news outlet. Rania is joining us from Beirut. Thank you so much for your time. Let's start off with Israel's intentions in southern Lebanon, Rania. The defense minister, Israel Katz, invokes the Rafah and Beit Hanun model for southern Lebanon. What does that say? What does it reveal about Israel's strategy and its end game beyond short-term security?
That's a great question. And, I think we have to listen to the Israelis when they say these things. They're essentially raising the border villages, every structure in them in the south of Lebanon in order to keep them depopulated of Lebanese. They've displaced over 1 million Lebanese, 600,000 of them at least from the south of Lebanon. And you have the Israeli defense minister saying that they will not be able to return, specifically referring to the Shias of southern Lebanon, though yesterday we saw the Israelis kind of laying the groundwork for targeting even Christian villages on the border of South Lebanon. And the intention here is increasingly clear. It's coming directly from the Israelis. They're saying that they want to occupy up to the Litani River, depopulate the south of Lebanese, and turn it into this kind of dead zone, buffer zone, though you have the more extreme elements of the Israeli government, people like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, talking about annexation and ultimately settling Israeli Jews in South Lebanon. So ultimately, this is becoming a project of territorial expansion for the Israelis, much in the same way they've done in Gaza, and increasingly what they're trying to do in Syria, and this kind of greater Israel project. And the more they say these kinds of things and carry out actions that allude to this, the more this is going to be seen by the Lebanese as a war not just on the south or on Hezbollah, but a war on the entire country.
But as you know, Rania, right now there are some in Lebanon who are cheering Israel's actions against Hezbollah. Others see it, as you say, as an existential threat. What risk does that pose to national cohesion? Could we be seeing civil strife if this drags on into a long war of attrition?
I mean, I think that's definitely what the Israelis would like to see. They've displaced over 1 million people from a specific sect who are now in areas full of people of different sects. We know that Lebanon has a history of this kind of civil chaos and even, civil war between different groups. And I think that's what the Israelis and to some degree the Americans are banking on here. And the longer this does go on, the longer you're going to see that tension play out. And of course, like you said, there is a segment of the Lebanese population, though I would say it's a small segment, but it's not insignificant, that is hoping to see this Israeli attack on Hezbollah in a positive light, in the sense of sort of weakening their domestic opponents inside the country. But again, the longer this war goes on and the longer it becomes, the more it becomes a war on the entire country, including with this hitting of civilian infrastructure, bridges, medical facilities, medical personnel, and also hitting outside the sort of scope of the zones that Israel usually targets in these wars, making everybody feel unsafe, the more people are going to feel it's a war on everybody, not just Hezbollah. And I think that'll change those dynamics a bit.
And what about the Iran war, the war on Iran? How does it play into this? How might the trajectory of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran dictate Lebanon's fate? If the war on Iran was to end in the next 2 to 3 weeks, as Donald Trump says, what would that mean for Lebanon?
Well, of course, the Lebanon and Iran fronts are connected. Hezbollah and Iran are partners. And if Iran comes out of this in a position of strength, they are saying that one of their conditions in any sort of settlement will be Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon and ceasing their attacks on Lebanon. So, of course, whether Israel would agree to that in some sort of settlement is a different story. Whether they would actually follow through on that is a different story. That said, if Iran comes out of this war in a position of weakness and seen as losing the war and isn't able to enforce any of those conditions, that would be really devastating for Lebanon in the sense that Hezbollah would be on their own. There would be zero constraints on the Israelis from the Americans, especially under the Donald Trump administration. And the Israelis are saying they are prepared to fight this war for years. So you would see a war of attrition. Whether Israel could actually occupy and successfully hold territory in Lebanon is not a guarantee. Historically, they haven't been able to do that. And Hezbollah and the people of the South will fight fiercely against that. But it will come at a huge cost to the country of Lebanon.
Yeah, and a huge cost for Lebanese people, of course. You've described, Rania, Israel's actions as not being targeted, but a broader war on Lebanese civilians. Where is the Lebanese government in all this? What is it doing to protect its population?
Well, as of now, the Lebanese government has taken a firm stance against Hezbollah. They have done nothing, not even now, but even before this war escalated, there was 15 months of ceasefire violations by the Israelis, and the Lebanese government did nothing to protect the people of the South. That's kind of been historically the case in Lebanon. And in many ways, it's the reason Hezbollah exists in the first place, because there hasn't been any protective measures from the state. And now you see the Lebanese government, particularly the prime minister, kind of begging the Israelis to make a peace deal, even without preconditions. And it's causing even more political polarization in the country and a feeling of extreme abandonment and neglect by the people of the South.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you for bringing us the picture there out of Lebanon. That's Rania Khalik joining us from Beirut. Thank you very much for your time. Now, Asian stocks rose after President Trump indicated the war with Iran may be over in 2 to 3 weeks. Japan's Nikkei index climbed 5% and South Korea's Kospi jumped 8%. The global benchmark Brent crude oil has fallen to around $100 per barrel after briefly hitting $119 on Tuesday. The International Energy Agency says the current crisis is worse than the oil crises of the 1970s and the 2022 Russian gas crisis combined. The organization says the loss of oil supply to the global market in April is likely to be twice as high as in March. That's due to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has restricted passage. A fifth of the world's oil supply flows through the waterway. 2 Pakistani-flagged ships have arrived in the port of Karachi via the Strait of Hormuz. It's part of an agreement between Iran and Pakistan, allowing for safe passage through the restricted waterway. Al Jazeera's Osama bin Javed reports from the port of Karachi.
At least 2 cargo ships have now arrived out of the 20 that Pakistan was able to secure through the Strait of Hormuz. One of them is a cargo ship, and one, we're being told, carries the energy supply for Pakistan. Is 80% of Pakistan's energy needs are fulfilled from the Arabian Gulf. We've been speaking to officials here who've been telling us about the situation that has improved for them, because the number of ships they've been able to handle in the last 4 weeks is almost equivalent to the number of ships that they handled in the entire year last year. And they're saying that there's more and more transshipment cargoes that are coming via Karachi's Karachi port, and the port of Port Qasim, and also the port of Gwadar is also being used for these transshipments. So it appears that there is some gain, and Pakistanis believe that because they've been able to secure these cargoes, it just shows that there is the possibility of an off-ramp, of confidence-building measures, of sides coming together to resolve their differences. But that would require both of these sides, the Iranians, the Americans, as well as the Israelis, to come off the maximalist positions that they have taken so far and are not willing to budge from them. But here in the Karachi port, in the Arabian Sea, there is now renewed confidence that this could possibly come to an end. According to Pakistani officials, they're involving all sides to the conflict, not just the GCC and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but also Turkey and now China as well. Pakistan says that it will continue to play the role of a mediator, because there is no other way that it can get involved in the conflict. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera, in the Arabian Sea at the Karachi port.
The Russian government is imposing a complete ban on petrol exports. The decision is meant to prevent Russian petrol producers from selling abroad, while Moscow continues to export crude oil and other oil products, including diesel, despite international sanctions. Yulia Shapovalova reports from the Russian capital.
The increase in fuel prices due to the war in Iran has made foreign markets even more attractive for Russian petroleum producers. But to prevent a deficit on the domestic market prior to high seasonal demand and to stabilize fuel prices, the Russian government is imposing a total ban on all exports of gasoline from April the 1st. The restriction applies to all market participants, including large petroleum producers.
The ban, though, does not apply to petrol supplies under international agreements. Crude oil and diesel fuel exports are not banned either, even though these have been seriously affected by recent Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia's refineries and ports. Just last week, Ukraine struck the ports of Primorsk and Ust-Luga on the Baltic Sea, as well as the country's second largest refinery in the Leningrad region. The attacks partly limited Russia's ability to export oil and oil products. There is a fear now that the level of oil processing and exporting in Russia may decrease in the near future because of the damage caused.
This is not the first time the authorities have imposed a temporary ban on gasoline exports. The previous petrol export restrictions for small refineries were introduced in September last year against the backdrop of record growth in fuel prices and scheduled shutdowns of refineries due to continued Ukrainian drone attacks and the risk of seasonal product shortage in some regions. It was lifted at the end of January in order to avoid a surplus on the domestic market.
As petrol producers have to sell at lower prices inside the country, where prices are significantly lower than internationally, the government compensates them using its so-called fuel damper. But the measure is not helping to reduce the growing discontent among petroleum producers here, who say their expenses are growing by the day. Drivers on the streets of Moscow are also complaining.
I have been a taxi driver for a year, and in that short time, gas prices have gone up about 8% per litre. Gasoline cannot get cheaper here, so everything else will get more expensive too.
Analysts predict that the gasoline exports ban can slow down domestic price growth, but it will not lead to a serious reduction in prices. And the external market situation will continue to have a negative impact on the Russian petrol market, even without the gasoline exports. Yulia Shapovalova, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Let's take a look now at some of the day's other news. And an explosion at a military depot in Burundi's capital has killed dozens of people.
That's our program for the day. Keep watching Morning Mic Drop On at Truth Talks Live, where your voice matters. We are here daily from 6 a.m. to noon with unfiltered breaking world news coverage. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for when we go live. See you tomorrow.